Thank you everyone for coming. So, welcome. How did I become a social media influencer? It's kind of a funny story. I started out really with photography. I would go take my mom's phone to our backyard and I would take pictures of the flowers, and as I got older and as I kind of gained more access to social media, I learned about the world of content creation and I started following influencers at the time. A lot of them were like Alicia Marie, mostly lifestyle creators, and I thought maybe I could do it too. And so I kind of started posting. I think it's good that I did it back then. I always joke that I would never start now, because back then I kind of had a blind faith going into it, not really caring what others thought of me, and I just wanted to post my content and do the things that I saw other people doing. So that's how I got into it. And from the outside looking in, it seems like it can be a very glamorous thing. You're filming your life, you get to work on your own schedule, but really there's a lot more involved than what meets the eye. There's a lot of content creation, thinking about it on the back end, editing, deadlines, contract negotiations with brands, responding to followers, whether that's through direct messaging, comments, just all that kind of stuff. Downtime is something where you have to be creative, so it's important to build in downtime so you don't burn out. Resiliency, there can be a lot of comments that are negative, so keeping your confidence and resiliency when it comes to that is important, and also being wise. I mean, I'm sure you've all heard about it in there and now in here, but it's important to be wise about what you're posting and be safe on social media. So there can be a dark side to social media influencing. I've been super blessed to be able to grow my following over the last couple of years. I'm almost at 200,000 on YouTube, about 65,000 on Instagram, and 67,000 on TikTok. And if you do the calculations, it's equivalent to about 4 Super Bowl stadiums full of people. So it's a lot to think about, and kind of like I was saying, from the outside looking in, it can seem like it's all good, but if you have the wrong eyes on your content, it can be a scary thing. Demographics-wise, I have about 92% women following me. About 74% of them are 13 to 24-year-olds, and about 63% in the United States. So the rest of that percentage is outside, kind of all over the world. So it's funny to think about a lot of people across the world following me. And I've even had some experiences with international followers where they're leaving comments about how they are experiencing completely different things. I had a follower from Ukraine leave a comment about the war at the time, and it was kind of an interesting juxtaposition because I was posting videos about my high school prom at the time, and she left a comment about how she was almost living vicariously through my content at the time when she was going through something completely different. So it might not seem like it, but you really are reaching people all over the world when you're posting on social media. I've done a lot of really cool brand work. Noteworthy projects include Lego, Nike. I did a fun TikTok ad with Nike, Grammarly, which is super relevant to me as a college student, Hollister, Poshmark, White Box Boutique, and Princess Polly Boutique are both more like teeny bopper, I guess you could say, brands clothing-wise. Beach Wave & Co., Kiehl's, Best Buy, and Fox Sports. Since I am at Colorado, there's a lot of buzz around Coach Prime and Deion Sanders and all that kind of stuff, so it was fun to do stuff on campus and really get plugged in through social media on my college campus. And when you really get down to it, social media followers can follow your every move, leave hateful comments, leave inappropriate comments. I've even had really weird people in my direct messaging that I've had to block asking for like feet, so just like weird people on social media, so you have to be careful about filtering your messages and going through all that kind of stuff. Stalking, harassing, we hear all kinds of scary stories about that. Impersonation, I don't know if any of you saw it, but there was a lot of talk about the Taylor Swift deepfake stuff on Twitter. So much of that going on with AI recently, and when people see you in person, they may not have healthy boundaries. I don't have a lot of experiences when it comes to that. I've had a lot of good interactions with followers publicly if I've ever been recognized, but it is something to think about because they know so much more about you than you know about them, and it's an interesting parallel. And a career in social media influencing, you might ask, even some of my friends asked when I was talking about this workshop, like what does that relate to safety? How does it relate to social media, and per an NPR episode in April 2023, 1 in 4 Gen Zers, which is 11 to 26-year-olds now, want to be a social media influencer. We're also seeing this with products, and there was some talk on TikTok about like the Sephora 12-year-olds and really young girls in like beauty stores and boutiques wanting the next big thing, really wanting the next big product. And for my generation, it was kind of like justice and more kids-focused stuff. But since these young kids are on social media, seeing all these extravagant skincare products, things like that, they want the next big thing and they want to become an influencer and kind of emulate that. Secondly, influencers do not start out landing big deals. So if you're ever in this position, it's important to not send your private information or pay any fees to get a deal or secure a manager. I experience this all the time over email. There's a lot of companies there's a lot of companies impersonated through scam emails, and it's easy to tell. Usually, for the most part, if you check the email, you can see like grammar mistakes, misspelling, just things that really don't look legit. And I thought it was a larger brand. I got super excited about an email and clicked on the email only to find out that the email address was like, let's say it was Sephora, like going back to the Sephora 12-year-olds, you look at the email address it came from and it's like Sephora XYZ at gmail.com versus like branding at Sephora.com. So it's easy to tell with little things what's a scam and what's not. You kind of just have to keep an eye out for it. Being careful of paying for courses is important, not offered by known entities or individuals on how to become a social media influencer. I took a course a couple years ago from a known social media influencer about brand deals and partnerships, but you see a lot of scams on the internet, and it's important to kind of do your due diligence when it comes to the entity that you're learning from and making sure that it is legit. Making a living through social media is hard work, and rarely do you find instant success in securing sponsored posts and brand partnerships. It took me probably about a good year to really land a big deal that I was super excited about. It's a lot of back and forth, and brands want to see that you have a good previous reputation and just building up your portfolio over time. I was going to link a TikTok in here, but we had some technical difficulties, but I did an ad for Poshmark on TikTok a couple months ago, and it ended up getting 16 million views. I made the content in over Thanksgiving break in November, and it didn't end up going live until January because they wanted to see a lot of edits with the content. And it's interesting working with brands because it can be so different. Some brands want you to do very scripted content. They want it to come off a certain way. They know what they want from the get-go, versus other brands that want to see creative work from the influencer and they want it to fit in organically. This one was a little bit more scripted. It was a little bit of both, I would say, but it ended up getting 16 million views because Poshmark promoted it through TikTok. So when I went to publish the video, I put an ad code embedded in the TikTok, and from their end, they could promote it, and it ended up getting a very large amount of views. So it's interesting to hear about that because I feel like a lot of times you just see the number, you see the view, and you don't realize how much really goes into it and the work on the back end and how brands can promote it from their end also. All right. Being smart, strategic, and safe online, whether you influence or not. This might be a little bit repetitive based on what you heard in the panel and just probably what you'll hear all weekend, but it's important to not leak or overshare information. Obviously, your full name, address, cell phone number, social security number. I hope that no one is sharing their social security number on social media. Also, not giving away your location. So kind of like I was saying on the panel, picturing your house or your front door or a location you frequent. In California, actually, a man, located a dance studio of a minor and began following her posts and gained enough information to find her house and break in. And a similar incident occurred in Florida where the perpetrator was actually shot by the influencer's father in their front yard. So there's a lot of people who are just digging deep with very poor intentions and we don't realize that an innocent post could become something super dangerous or could could lead to some kind of stalking or harassment via social media and then obviously become something super dangerous. Do not film wearing your school logo, school name, or sports uniform. Now that I'm on a bigger campus, it's kind of impossible to hide where I am when it comes to content. But when I was in high school, I would hide my school logos until like towards the very end of my senior year, and I was super careful about not showing where I went to school because if I revealed that information, someone with the wrong intentions would know where I was from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. 5 days a week, and I went to a small private school, so that would be just a breach of privacy completely had I let that go public. I even changed the colors in some photo editing apps of my cheer uniforms because I was a cheerleader, and I just really tried to, kind of like I was saying, do my due diligence when it came to privacy and making sure that I was hiding logos and keeping things as secure as I could. Be careful what you can see in your photo. I mentioned this on the panel, but in Japan, a man used his victim's Instagram selfies, in particular the reflection in her eyes, to pinpoint her local train station. And I was blown away when I read this story because it just seems so wild that you can zoom into a photo and see someone's location through the reflection in their eyes. And that really goes to show how people with the wrong intentions can really go to extreme lengths to do certain things that just are beyond belief. Just wild that he was able to use her eyes to figure out where she was. This one might be a little obvious, but do not engage with strangers, and if anyone is threatening you, stalking you, or blackmailing you online, tell your parents and the authorities. Ask permission to post images of friends and families, especially minors. I also babysat a lot in high school, and I was super careful about not showing photos of the kids on social media or making sure that I had the parents' permission if I was ever going to do that. Be mindful of what you are wearing, holding your hand, or how you might be gesturing. Your post can attract the attention of the wrong individuals. Also, social media is the first stop for employers, so don't adversely impact your future career. I talked a little bit about this on the panel with the sorority stuff and BIBS, which is an acronym that my sorority uses. If anyone's posting something inappropriate or, God forbid, illegal on social media, you just comment or text them BIBS, which stands for Bring It Back, Sister. And when I was going through recruitment initially, I was told to not cover the 5 Bs, which were, I believe it was bucks, beliefs,
What you got here?
we talked about this. What were the other ones? It was bucks, beliefs,
Ballots,
booze, and boys. Those were the 5 Bs, like the things that could become controversial. And generally, it's probably best to leave those things off of social media too, in case a college or future employer is seeing that information. You just don't want the wrong. People can interpret anything. I mean, everyone interprets things differently, and you don't know who's looking at your content. One good analogy that I heard from someone is that, for example, I would tell a story probably differently to my peer and my best friend than I would to a teacher, just in terms of tone, in terms of the way I'm talking about it, speaking about it, and in the case of social media and posting videos online, your story is going to that entire audience, and you kind of have to cater it to both the perception of your best friend and maybe a teacher figure, and you just never know how people are going to interpret things, which is why a lot of content leads to hateful messages, and people can interpret things the wrong way really easily on social media. Someone might be having a bad day, leave a terrible comment, things like that. Okay, on that note, do a social media audit. Go through your social media accounts and remove photos or posts that provide too much information about you or that create an image you don't want out there. Keep in mind too that even if you have blocked someone on social media, they may be able to see your account by using another person's account or creating a fake profile. When you're private, it's a fine line. You're really not completely private, and people can screenshot things, people can take photos of your phone with other devices, and you just never know. When you're blocking someone, they can still most likely access your content from other browsers and through creating other accounts. Okay, I've talked a lot about the negative and the dangers, but there are a lot of positives as well to social media and influencing. Per the 2023 Tech Report, teenagers reported the following positives about social media. 80% said they became more connected to their friends. I'm sure a lot of you can relate, but I experienced this a lot in COVID when everyone was in quarantine, isolated. I felt like I could connect with my friends through social media and through technology. 71% believed they could express their creativity. 67% felt they received support when emotionally weak. A lot of this I feel like goes for example, the sweet follower in Ukraine who was experiencing such turmoil and hardship, she was able to find a little bit of joy through social media, through my videos specifically, and I'm sure through a lot of other content. For me specifically, I feel like I can almost disconnect and enter another world when I'm on social media, because it can be a good thing and a bad thing. You're doom scrolling, but sometimes it can also be a positive escape if you're following the right people and looking at the right content. 58% felt their confidence had been boosted. And regarding influencing, the positive aspects reported by Forbes were the following. Influencers create a community for people. It's kind of silly, but I almost don't want to grow my audience past a certain point because I love that I can have good conversation in my comments and have what feels like a tight-knit community online of girls who I can relate to, they can relate to me, and it just becomes a really cool dynamic. And influencers provide creativity in marketing products. I'm going to play this video really quick and talk a little bit more about the brand partnership side.
Hi, Erin.
Hi.
Okay, so I'm gonna just give you some actions to do. And just do the first thing that comes to mind. Show me what it looks like to run like a girl.
My hair.
Show me what it looks like to fight like a girl. Now throw like a girl.
Aww.
My name is Dakota, and I'm 10 years old.
Show me what it looks like to run like a girl. Throw like a girl. Fight like a girl. What does it mean to you when I say run like a girl?
It means run fast as you can.
So do you think you just insulted your sister?
No. Yeah, insulted girls, but not my sister.
Is like a girl a good thing?
Actually, I don't know if it's a bad thing or a good thing. It sounds like a bad thing. It sounds like you're trying to humiliate someone.
So when they're in that vulnerable time between 10 and 12, how do you think it affects them when somebody uses like a girl as an insult?
I think it definitely drops their self-confidence and really puts them down because during that time, they're already trying to figure themselves out. And when somebody says you hit like a girl, it's like, well, what does that mean? Because they think they're a strong person. It's kind of like telling them that they're weak and they're not as good as them.
And what advice do you have to young girls who are told they run like a girl, kick like a girl, hit like a girl, swing like a girl?
Keep doing it because it's working. If somebody else says that running like a girl or kicking like a girl or shooting like a girl is something that you shouldn't be doing, that's their problem. Because if you're still scoring and you're still getting to the ball on time and you're still being first, you're doing it right. Doesn't matter what they say. Yes, I kick like a girl and I swim like a girl and I walk like a girl and I wake up in the morning like a girl because I am a girl. And that is not something that I should be ashamed of. So I'm gonna do it anyway. That's what they should do.
If I asked you to run like a girl now, would you do it differently?
I would run like myself.
Would you like a chance to redo it?
Yeah.
Why can't run like a girl also mean win the race?
So good. It was not for Dove, actually. It was always. That was
Yeah,
my
sorry.
bad on there. But I kind of chose to show that ad because you should see a little bit of the behind the scenes in terms of camera equipment, people, the studio space, and a lot of times when I talk about the money involved in brand partnerships when it comes to
Turn that off.
what in the world?
I don't know where that
When it comes to brand partnerships, hold on. Oh, it kept blank. Anyway, when it comes to brand partnerships, brands have such massive budgets, and it's kind of shocking the amount that really large influencers and content creators get paid. And people are just appalled at the numbers that brands have to allocate for partnerships with influencers. And my favorite way to describe it is that in the case of the Always ad, there's people coming in, they're filming, they're paying for the studio space, editors, they're paying for camera equipment, producers, all that kind of stuff. I'm sure makeup artists, styling. And when it comes to influencer marketing, you can get all of that in one payment to an influencer with a target audience that is already determined. I mean, you can look at the demographics, see the target audience, and all of that money is going to one person with a trusted audience. So that's why brands have so much money to allocate for partnerships, and they have such massive marketing budgets because they can guarantee that there will be a return on their investment when it comes to sales, because an influencer is reaching such a direct target audience in a really unique way. So that's all I have on that front. And I'm going to turn it over back to Meredith, who also happens to be my mom.
Yes. Okay, so just to be clear, I really didn't want her to do this. So it actually turned out pretty good, but I was kind of the parent on top of it, and so I would give them. When we had communication regarding safety and social media, I would say this. This is like some of the things that I would say. One is never post anything you wouldn't want to see plastered on the side of a bus going by. Or think of, oh my gosh, they saw that. If it was okay for that person to see that, the last person you'd want to see it, then it's okay to post. So these are things that I would say. And when you look at YouTube, and we talked about looking at, when you hit agree to an upgrade or whatever in the panel, I actually looked at their terms and conditions. I did back then, and I just did recently again. And so a 13-year-old can get onto YouTube, and if you read the phrasing of it, it's that with their parents' control, all the 13-year-old has to do, or younger, is say, my parents with me, basically, and they can, start their own YouTube account. So she really wanted to, for the longest time, because the videos that she did, she wouldn't show her face, because said, you can't show your face, you can't show your location, you can't do this, you can't do that. So she kind of did something in our house called splitting staff, I'm going to say.
Oh, right.
Yeah, oh, right. So if you go to dad or you go to mom, so she kind of went to dad. She said, look, you at this age, and I think it was 14, you were 14, but at this age, you could start a YouTube account. So he's like, well, okay, that's fine. So she did, and I was like, what? And so that's when things kind of got a little tighter. Okay, make sure that if, as you do this, you're seeing anything inappropriate, you come to me. So I think the key here, and I'm sort of going off topic here, is communication. And so I was like, you can't show your school uniform, the logo, location, anything like that. We did use social media controls, and for the parents that are in here, if you have more than one child, every child is different. And so we use kind of the standard controls that I'll talk about in just a minute. But some of our children needed more than some of our other children in terms of the controls and what we allowed them to do. So communication is key. We kept the dialogue open and said, if you don't feel something comfortable. At one point, Katie came to me and she said, I have this person, and this is their picture, and their picture looked like the demographic on the younger age, but they're asking me these questions, and clearly from that I could tell this might be the picture, but these questions are not the types of questions that child the age in the picture would ask. So, you can delete. I think we showed last year here at the Global Center a film called Sextortion. And two things to note, just as much as somebody can catch your reflection in the eye of your location, so too is how they use it to catch a perpetrator. So it works in both directions. But one of the things in that movie that stood out to me with some of the victims of sextortion, where they got into the point where they felt like they had to continue the conversation or to go back and forth. And it was really poignant. One of the victims said she hadn't disclosed it to the parents, and part of it was it had gotten to the point in the sextortion where they had said, I know where you live, I know your family, if you don't send me photos, I'm gonna kill your family, basically. So she was very scared and hadn't mentioned anything, and finally it just had gotten to such a point where she said she realized I don't have to keep responding, so she physically took her laptop and put it on train tracks, and so that a train could smash her device. She wouldn't have to feel like she was tied to that abuse anymore. So I think that it's important to know that you don't have to respond, you don't have to. We tend to be polite, I think, in some ways. We're taught to be, so we think we have to respond, or I think the kids are used to the back and forth of social media, but you don't have to. If something isn't right, you don't have to. This may be a different parental concept that you have, because I've heard parents say, well, I don't want to, infringe upon their privacy. Our rules in our house were different. It was like, we pay for your phone, we have the ability to look at the content on your phone. And again, that was with a lot of communication and a lot of kind of respect to understand that if they're good, they are going to be on social media, and so we're going to have communication and talk, and we do have the ability to look at what you're posting. I still, to this day, so she seems impervious to some of the negative comments, but I'm her mom, so I don't. So I will look at some of the viewer comments, and I will be like, oh, and so I'll text her, did you see this comment from so-and-so? And she'll just like, oh yeah, whatever, I'll delete it. So I still, even to this day, look at some of the comments that she's on, of the people on her different platforms. So here's some, we've talked a lot about stuff, but we haven't talked about specific tools. So I've thrown some out here for you. A lot of the devices have built-in security tools that you can use without having to pay any extra money. But there are others out there, and one book that I would recommend, there's a couple books I'd recommend, but one is Parenting in the Digital Age, and the person who wrote that's Clay Cranford. He actually is our oldest son was friends with his son, and he's an Orange County sheriff who ended up getting into this kind of parenting the digital world, and he has a lot of great tips, and he's also, he's got a social media presence, and he was just recently, I think, on a news station in LA interviewed. So I would recommend that book. It's a really good book. It's not long. It's a good read. And then other paid solutions. I mean, you can Google and look these up, but these are just a list of some of them that allow you to either track your child's location or to use safeguards to see the content that they're using. With one of our children, we did utilize, and it's not a service that's, it would be up here, but it's not a service that's any longer offered, but it did monitor their internet usage, and so we would sit down and talk about what they were looking at, and it would alert us if there was something and it would alert us to a site that wasn't necessarily a bad site, but it's a site that could lead to another site that could be harmful. So we did use that in our home. Also, we didn't allow, for a while, their phones to be in their room. And these are studies that show that actually the blue lights from the phone interrupt the sleep. So just even access, going back to this extortion film, all of these, obviously, victims were taking pictures, being asked to take pictures of themselves. They were being sextorted, and these all happened within their room with their phone, with the door closed. So I think if you're, one of the signs is they mentioned yesterday is if your child is in their phone or in their room all the time with the door closed or has to get to their room. I think it just makes it a lot less easier if you either have a rule that the door's not closed or that, especially in the later hours, that the phone's not in the room. It just takes away kind of that possibility. and I said unrestricted access to the phone. This is something that somebody said in a presentation. Any child can be a victim and any adult predator. There are many stories at the Global Center because we're dealing with human trafficking that we hear about parents who are on it, parents that know what's going on. But unfortunately, their child got access in some other way, not in their home device, and was trafficked, basically. And the story was trafficked. And this was like a homeschool student, parents involved and engaged. And so you just really have to have a good communication, understand what, if you're a teacher, having conversations of what they're doing online, or if you're a parent, basically asking what they're doing. And then that goes to establishing a digital curfew. And then the one thing that I think is important too is that you as a parent, if there are parents in this room, actually walk the walk. If we're doom scrolling, if we're doing the same thing that we're asking them not to do, it's very difficult to then model that. So I would say walk the walk. And I talked about every child being different. Yeah. So, and it's not just the role of a parent. We've talked about this in this conference. It's not just, it's also holding accountable some of these companies and working as a community to keep our kids safe. But here are some student tips. Be careful when you're using Wi-Fi. Use a private VPN, especially if you're going to be downloading anything. Always check what emails you are going to download and see if there's attachments there. Update software when prompted. A lot of times the software updates have to do with security. Don't share inappropriate photos of yourself. Now I think it's really important to even think about what photos. There's a continuum of what's considered appropriate, right? So I think even if you're on this side of the continuum now with AI, you just want to be very careful what kind of things you're posting that could be utilized in a way that would come back to hurt you. And I think the biggest statistic, if you remember yesterday, was it's low, the amount of photos that people are sharing of themselves that are inappropriate. I think it was in the 20%. But then that jumps in terms of higher in percentages who's then taking that information and forwarding it. There's a higher percentage of that content than being forwarded on. So just because you think you might share something yourself doesn't mean that it isn't going to be taken and then forwarded on from that point. Don't leave your devices unattended. Don't be tempted, and you can not respond. Like I said before, you can say, I'm not going to do that. There's a really good book called The Gift of Fear, and it is written about stories of victims of violence, a lot of them rape, and those people were interviewed after these incidents, and they all said something similar that led to the writing of the book, which is, and I'll give you a particular example. Someone had gone grocery shopping and they were taking their groceries out of their car and carrying them up to their second floor apartment, and a gentleman was there and said, hey, do you need help with your groceries? And the person said yes, helped carry up to the groceries behind her, shut the door, locked the door, and she became a victim of rape. She said, and all the people in the book said, I had this feeling that it wasn't right, but I didn't want to not be polite, or I had this feeling that I probably shouldn't walk home at night here, or so there was this intuition, this gut feeling, and I think that's something that we need to talk to with our students and our children, that if something doesn't feel right on any level, it's probably not right. So that book is great as a resource. It kind of flies in the face of having a child who's so very public to say keep your social media accounts private. But I'll give an example. So Katie is an identical twin. So she has a sister out there who looks just like her, who, because she is sometimes on her channel, or because she is, seen in the videos, people will find her sister and ask to be her friend, right? But her account is private. She probably has a bazillion friend requests, right? But she doesn't want to be public in that fashion. So, it's about mitigating opportunities. And so if your child isn't looking to be in a public setting, whether they have a talent that they're sharing, then private is the best way to go. And yes, there are still ways to get around that, but it's really about mitigating any opportunity for danger. So keeping accounts private. And then this is a graphic that I found online about the different ways that a study had done where students could be experience some issues online. One was scholarship scams with those going to college, asking for your information. We promise to give you this, and then you give it information and it's out there. Same thing with tuition payment scams. You know, once you get into a college setting, where you pay your tuition is usually through a portal, or you know what kind of messages you get. But these were scams asking for tuition payments, or scams saying we can help you with your tuition payment. Identity theft, that's pretty straightforward. Phishing, doxing, it was something new for me. Doxing is the act of publicly providing personally identifiable information about an individual or organization, usually via the internet and without their consent to cause harm. We gotta wrap it up because we've got Q&A. And then downloading malware that this actually happened to my 82-year-old dad. He was downloading malware and they were saying, we need this information to help you, blah, blah, blah. And we were like, stop, no! So it can happen to any age. Also, too, there are scams with regard to employment where they may contact you and offer you a job, ask you for information, and it's through Skype or what are some of the other ways I'm thinking of? Like WhatsApp or Skype or that kind of way, and that is not usually how an employer is going to contact you or offer you, or you get information from you. So you need to, even when you're looking for jobs, make sure you're doing your due diligence online and asking for proof that they physically have a location, that the address is the person. They can take people's picture at a certain company, like an HR person, and pose as that person with their picture. Same thing online with children posing as someone their own age when they're actually an adult. So let's go ahead, because we're at the end of time here. We're going to move to Q&A. Did you want to take this part on the slide, or do you want me to?
Sure. I just wanted to wrap up with, we're all going to be on social media. We're an online generation, and it's hard to stay interconnected with a lot of things going on, especially in a school setting on campus, without being on social media, without being on at least some form of social media. So it's important to be careful who you engage with, trust your gut, know your worth is not in what others comment, think, or how you look, and watch what kind of content you consume. We all know the saying of how you are, like the sum of the 5 people you surround yourself with. Some people even say, like, you are what you eat in a diet setting, and you really do become what you surround yourself with. So it's important to stay mindful of what you're consuming. And this one too, she wanted me to put this in there. Influencers are regular people. I get acne, have bad days, get stressed out with school. Even if it seems like someone's life is super perfect from the outside looking in on social media, it's most likely not. Everybody deals with real problems, and it's so easy to fabricate certain things on social media and possibly make things seem a way they're not. So
She does a lot of different videos on cleaning up her room, and we laugh at them. We're like, really? Because that is not what her room normally is like. So it's not all what you see, right? So just keep that in mind.
yeah.
We're not doing Slido in here, so if you have any questions, you just raise your hand and we're happy to answer the questions. Anyone have any questions? Yes?
I am in a public school district, and through marketing, through state media, there's a push for schools to use branding and social media. I am also a parent, not of the child in my district, but as a parent who has not given consent for my children's photos to be promoted, there's a lot of pressure for schools to parents that that we don't give permission. I don't want my children to be on social media. My kids are super young and I'm not ready for that. So what is your advice as a parent, and then also understanding the perspective of the school, because branding purposes, that's what we're trying to do, right? What is your perspective as a parent of a child?
So I have worked in different settings. So I've worked as an academic advisor in a high school. I've worked as a registrar. So I've been in different school settings before I came to Vanguard, and before that in the business world I worked for Microsoft. And so I would say hold steady and fast to that, because they have to give you that option to opt out, and you don't have to have their image shown. in those settings. So I would say hold tight to that. Yeah. Anyone else have a question? Melanie.
How do you verify scholarship websites, or how do you make sure, like how you were saying, a lot of them are fake? Like I do see a lot, like on social media promoted, and then
Right.
I want
That's a really good question. I think most of well, first of all, you have. Oh, I'm so sorry. So she said, how do you verify that a scholarship is legitimate if you're going to be applying to a scholarship? Because there is a lot of stuff online. So scholarships are going to come through your school, right? So you know that you can apply there. But it's about the type of information they're asking. For the most part, these scholarships should be asking you for, they may ask you to write an essay, right? Most of them do. But they shouldn't be asking you information beyond like your email. So it's when they're asking for more information than is appropriate. They're usually not going to ask you for your address. It's usually a contact through an email. Or I don't think anyone's ever asked for a phone.
Or maybe the school that you're attending.
Right, or the school that you're attending. So yeah, think about the information they're asking you, and that should like be a tip to this probably isn't an actual scholarship. So you can also, if it's a website, call, verify it's a certain location, you can do that too. Do follow-up sleuthing work. Yeah, because if you can't find any, usually these are like the Chamber of Commerce or particular groups and organizations. So you should be able to verify that they're who they say they are, and they shouldn't be asking you for detailed information like that. Not at that point, Thank you. Yeah. Anybody else?
I have one. So when you do get those weird comments and like weird DMs, like what goes through your mind like when you get them, and like was it like a process to like learn how to deal with it? Because I know Meredith mentioned like, oh, I'll just delete them later. Mm-hmm. Did it take you time to get to that point where you like aren't like faced by it, or was that just from the beginning? Right. And do you have tips about that?
Did everybody hear that question? Okay, so she asked Katie, how did you get to the point where you kind of knew what you should delete as a DM, or to the point where it didn't kind of impact you personally? Like, what was that process, right?
Mm-hmm. It impacted me a little bit at first because, I mean, it's mostly positive stuff, but you see that one negative thing and it's kind of like, oh dang, it really it's like a stab in the back. But I kind of learned over time that these are people who, like, if someone's really online leaving negative comments, they should like get something better to do with their time. And when you really look into it, a lot of times those hateful accounts are like user 5786, and they are creating separate profiles to leave these comments so that there's no trace of them online. And to me, that's just sad. And I kind of got to the point where I was like, okay, if I'm really going to let this impact me, then it's going to probably be a useless waste of time, because this person is so ashamed of their comments, or maybe jealous, or having something else go on. I mean, hurt people, and if someone's creating those fake accounts to leave those comments, it's like, how much should I really let this affect me? So it's kind of a double-edged sword, because there's so much positive, but the small amount of negative can sting. But I feel like over time I'm like, okay, delete. And it's really not that much. It's just when you see it, it does kind of like, oh, dang. But, is what it is. Yeah. Go ahead.
How do you keep yourself from finding your entire identity with being an influencer and through your perception of social media? How do you keep yourself
from Did everybody hear that?
That's a great question. I feel like it's so easy to get caught up in comparison and the trap of social media doom scrolling, and people are portraying their lives as perfect and flawless on social media. I think for me, I am a Christian, and I find a lot of my worth in my faith, and that's a super important aspect. But on the flip side, so much is fake on social media, and I have to remember that we never really see the full picture. And with AI and editing apps, there's so much that people can do to make things look different. And I actually had an interview with somebody on campus at college a couple weeks ago, and she was asking oh, what do you think is different about your life on social media versus your real life? And I was like, I like to think it's not that much different, but the one thing I could think of is, oh, maybe I might not get like as ready for the day, or I might not put on as much makeup if I know I'm not filming that day. But the same goes for really any other job. I think you just are hyper aware of it because you're on for the camera all the time filming yourself. But for me, I try to really find my worth in my faith and my relationships versus on social media, because so much is fabricated and you really never know the full truth. So I would say that.
We keep her real.
That too, yeah. Anything else? Go ahead.
Since you started this profession during high school, how did you prioritize? Because I think digital arts is such a beauty that you create, but then I don't know how to, as a parent, like give respect and a time for that. Like how much time? Now almost projects are digital arts. Like even just their group projects are done digital arts, and they do crazy awesome stuff. But yeah, how much time did you spend on that, and then also make room for friends and act like extracurricular?
Yeah, it almost was a blessing and a curse because I was spending a lot of time editing. Most of the time that I was spending, and most of the time I do spend now on social media, is the editing side of things because that takes the longest. But if I didn't like go out and be with my friends, I wouldn't have been able to film that content to later edit. So that was a motivator, and it is hard because, I mean, now in college especially, I don't do anything really on paper. Everything's online, and it's just constant screens. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean,
I totally understand where you're
to
coming
be really authentic, it's super time consuming. You know, when she talked about the fact that it's not glamorous, it's like, she has a full-time job essentially, and she's a full-time college student. So, and then trying to have relationships. I know, sorry, it's making it sound so sad. But no, it's a lot. It's a lot. So it's important to I think take care of yourself in that process too.
Yeah, kind of like the burnout thing. I mean, now we're doing so much online project-wise, and it requires a lot of creativity, but if you don't give yourself space for social interaction and enough off-screen time, it can lead to a lot of burnout.
But I wrestle with because there are projects that I did and I see past midnight. Yeah. And it was like I draw on a poster or on a display, but then they're on screen to do their project. Yeah. So I don't know how to crazy awesome stuff.
Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
How are you using AI, if you are, to kind of help with that workload, or?
I haven't really used it a lot. I've almost used it more for school, which is funny. I'll have it help me write essay outlines and things like that. But I don't really like it. It kind of freaks me out, and I kind of want it to go away. But if I were to use it, I think I would use it on descriptions and maybe help with email things. I didn't really get to cover this, but I work with a manager at an agency, and she helps me organize my brand deals and look through contracts and legal stuff. So maybe I would use it for help with that if I didn't have that connection, but I don't know. I don't love it. It kind of freaks me out. I'm like, it's taking away our jobs, and I want it to go away. But I should probably, use those resources a little more. Go ahead.
Why do you think so many kids want to be influencers?
I think because it makes your life look so glamorous. I mean, you're filming, and a lot of influencers right now, there's a big Tarte, the makeup brand, has a bunch of influencers on this trip to Bora Bora, and they took a private jet, and it just looks so extravagant. And because you're seeing the content, you don't see the editing side and the negative side a lot of times, and it just looks like, I mean, there is a lot of money involved in it too. I think that's a part of it. A lot of influencers are showing flashy things and, like I was saying, extravagant vacations. So I think that's why, and probably a lack of exposure to other professions. If we're on social media all the time and that's all we're really seeing, maybe that could contribute also. That's my best guess. Go ahead.
I'm just curious, what would you say your long-term goals are with this? I mean, 10 years down the road, right?
Right, that's a great question. I think about that all the time. And I think what's cool about my content is that I have the college student side, and also I've been doing content creation for about 5 years now, and people love to see that relatability. There's a side of influencing where you see all the flashy stuff and the people who are only doing influencing as their full-time job, and I don't really want to ever get to that point. I think it's fun to always have something on the side, and ideally I'd love to open my own business and or have a part-time job while also still doing content creation, because with time, if that were my full-time job, I feel like my content would become unrelatable, and I don't ever want to get too carried away in that world. So ideally, I'd love to have something on the side and still be doing content creation and be able to dip my feet into a little bit of both. Any other questions?
I have one. Yeah. So since we talked about how like a lot of kids like they want to be influencers, and I really liked how you talked about like what to do and not just what not to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think like with kids who want to do those things and like with parents it could be like, oh, don't do this, don't do that, but it's like,
Right.
what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
And so like if a kid like wanted to be an influencer and like came to you, like what would you
Mm-hmm.
like what like advice would you give them about like
Yeah.
what to do as well as what not to do?
My best advice is cross promotion, which kind of means you're creating content over a couple different platforms, and then let's say I made a video for YouTube and then I went on Instagram to promote that video to drive people to that platform, and the more you grow on every platform, the more it can transfer, the more that viewership can transfer across. Also, I think more than ever now, high quality content is super important because people have exposure to so much content that they see, and whereas a couple years ago you might have been able to get away with a lot of growth when it came to content that was not as high quality, but now we all have such short attention spans from scrolling and just the instant gratification of social media that if your content is not high quality and super engaging, people probably aren't going to want to watch. So I would say my top tips are cross promotion, high quality content, and also creating relatable content is super important. A lot of people don't, like, straight from the get-go, they don't want to see all the flashy stuff. If you can create a trusted relationship with an audience if you're relatable and they feel that they're almost your friend. Like I was saying, it's kind of a strange parallel because they know so much about you and you don't know as much about them, but I would say those things. Yeah. I wish I could say more, but it's kind of just like growth over time. The more you post, the more your content's out there, and searchable content too is important. Yeah.
One more question. Since we haven't seen your content yet, do you integrate your faith at all, or do you keep
Yes.
that separate?
I do, which is funny because I talked about the whole 5 Bs thing, but I do, and that's become really cool for me too, and another reason why I mentioned the community aspect of things. I think it's so awesome that I have the blessing of the ability to reach so many people across the world, and we see so much negativity and just like a very wide variety of lifestyles on social media. Alex Earl, for example, I don't know if any of you know who she is, went to the University of Miami. She lives a very fun, party-filled lifestyle, and while it's cool to see that and cool to see all the opportunities that she's gained from that, I also think it's important that we have representation on social media for the average college student, somebody who's dealing with real life things, and the fact that I get to integrate my faith into it is a really cool aspect, and it kind of keeps me anchored and grounded because all the feedback and commentary, can make you feel a certain way, maybe sway you in a certain direction, but I know that my worth is in my faith and that I'm wonderfully made by a wonderful creator. So it's awesome that I get to share that too. Yeah.
Do you, how do you balance, your personal life with your account? Because you have so many followers. How do you balance it? You're very personal. So, do you have another personal account that's just, your actual close friends?
Right.
Or, how do you balance that?
Yeah, I do have a personal account, but I have stopped using it, kind of. But I have a private Instagram account for close friends and family, and also a more public one. And when it comes to balancing, college and all the work that comes with content creation, I feel blessed that I've been doing it for so long because it's kind of just second nature to me now. It's part of my routine because I did it all through high school. But you have to definitely walk the line on what you can and can't share. Obviously, details of friendships, relationships. I'm not going to go up and share my drama that I'm experiencing with friends, things like that, because my friends didn't choose to share their life publicly, things like that. So you have to be careful about more, I guess,
boundaries.
Boundaries, yeah, more intimate things like that.
And I don't like to be shown
No, she doesn't love it, but that's okay. Yeah.
How do you think that being an influencer like affected your entrance into like the world of academia or like higher education? Like, do you think that it like goes hand in hand with like the major that you chose as, or like how has it affected you?
So did everybody hear that question? How did being an influencer potentially impact her college entrance, right? And maybe the choice of her major.
Yeah, that's a great question. So my major is strategic communications with an emphasis in advertising. So it's a cool major because I can pick whether I want to go down an advertising, PR, or media design track. So I've chosen the advertising track, and it's really cool to see now both sides because I've worked from the influencer marketing side. It's cool to see from the more corporate side how advertising works and I guess the science behind it. But I actually wrote about my YouTube channel for my college essay. So it was like a direct relation, and I was a little scared going into college, like how am I going to adapt, how's my content going to adapt to my new lifestyle, that kind of thing. But it really ended up being a cool, like smooth, seamless transition, and I feel like it grew my audience in a unique way because I had a lot of high school students following me, and now going into college, those same high school students are following me, while also people in college who might want to see a relatable side are watching the content too. Any other questions?
Oh, one more over here.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
What do you think is the responsibility of influencers because you have a platform in terms of like speaking on social issues?
That's a really good question. I tend to avoid things that are controversial when it comes to social issues. I sponsored a child. I still do sponsor a child through Compassion International, and I love to share that. I love to share the positive charitable things that you can do because obviously there's no harm in spreading that good stuff, but I really try to stay away from like politics and things that are controversial because I really want people to come to my page and leave feeling motivated and happy and not necessarily weighed down by the heavy things that are going on in the world. I think it's easy to assume that influencers have a responsibility, but at the end of the day, it's like we all do at that point then because we all have a platform on social media. So it's another thing where you kind of have to walk the line, and it's very context related for me, what I do and don't want to share when it comes to that stuff. Yeah.
When you're developing like a healthy relationship and boundary with social media, do you think that was developed? I'm sure it was both, but developed with you and your mom, or with you and your peers? Did you and your peers talk about healthy relationship with media? And
I think it was a little bit of both, and I'm learning even more now in some of my media studies classes in college. The true impact of social media on our brains, science-wise, but I think it was kind of a learned thing over time. I mean, we talked about it a little bit, but I don't think anyone in my family really realized that this was going to get to the point that it's at now, but I think it was a learned thing over time for me. I mean, I talk with my friends a little bit about it. We always are talking about our screen time and how we can limit that, how much of that we have, and I think it just kind of came with time. I decided what I could include.
Was there boundaries like set in the home first, and then, or was it like self?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of was, I don't know if it was necessarily a media thing, but it was just like the phone.
Yeah.
You know, the phone had to be outside my room at a certain time at night. I have really bad memory. You probably remember more about this than I do.
Yeah, it was some of the things I had mentioned before that there was just a lot of communication about the content they were consuming, you know, and like in the case of their brother, they weren't into, the girls weren't into gaming, but their brother was, and so there was a lot of conversation around that because you can interact with outside, you know, entities. That was like, there was not a TV in the room, so when you're gaming, you're in the main room where everyone can hear, you know, what's going on. So there was just a lot of open communication about what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, who you know, type of stuff I literally as a parent, I would do that. I don't know if I was the bibs, I would go, do we really need to post this? Like I would say.
Oh yeah.
I would say, do we really need to post this? Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't really like that very much.
I never really was posting anything like that. It was like things we would see of my friends or other people. Yeah. So she would always send it and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they posted this. Like, this is so crazy. And I kind of knew, like, I better never be posting anything like that because it will not
like
be
there
approved.
were cases where I would say, she's wearing half a shirt. Like you could see, like she's not. Do you think I should text her? And they'd be like, no.
Yes.
So I would be like, I just let her know she's missing her shirt. Like, so I mean, that's kind of how I would handle it a lot with humor. You know, like this is my boundary. It's not appropriate. So that's fine for these other people, but that's not something I expect for you to be doing.
I know a
So
lot of parents in our generation are struggle with like how much could we say something.
Yeah.
Like I have their password. I see their phone all the time. But I just think about the friends that I have of parents who are like, oh, I don't know how much I can.
He's turning a blind
yeah, and I think I had a little bit of an advantage working in a high school environment, you know, because I worked in 2 different high schools, because I could see what was going on, you know, and hear the lingo and talk, you know, so that for me as a parent was helpful that I had like that. So it was easy for me to have conversations. I know sometimes it's not easy for parents to have those kinds of conversations, but I think you really need to in this day and age, because when those conversations have gone by the wayside, that's when, you know, kids have been exposed. Because you just think that everything's okay, you know. And it's not my child wouldn't do that. It's not what your child wouldn't do. It's what the other people out there want to do. So anyway, we probably should break for lunch.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for coming.